You're listening to the Angry Marks Podcast Network.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. My name is Arya Widner, and this is your NXT update for Wednesday, October 18th, 2017. Today is my 7-year anniversary for writing and doing these NXT reports every single week. I want to thank Stevie J for putting up with me for the last 7 years. And, of course, I want to thank every single one of you who have read what I've written, listened to what I've said, and, hopefully the next 7 years are just as fun as the first 7. On to NXT this week, it kicked off with a triple threat women's title qualifying match as Ember Moon, Ruby Riot, and Sonya Deville all attempted to join Kairi Sane and Peyton Royce in the Fatal 4-Way match at NXT TakeOver to determine the new NXT Women's Champion. Now, I should note that this week, for the first time, they actually took away the word Houston in the TakeOver name. Now, of course, I think we all at this point know what the NXT TakeOver main event's going to be, and we know what the subtitle of this NXT TakeOver is. But for the sake of, avoiding spoilers with the TV program, we're just going to keep on calling it NXT TakeOver for now. Each lady took turns having the advantage on both opponents, as almost shockingly, there were no attempts by any two of them to team up and eliminate the third girl. Ember made the first big mistake of the match as she went for a springboard what-a maneuver, but Deville speared her in midair. That probably would have been enough for the pin, but Riot dove in to break it up. Deville got hers a few seconds later when she ran down the apron for a dive onto Ember, but instead she got caught with a drop kick. And then Ruby decided to go 3 for 3 with bad ideas in regards to high-risk maneuvers anyway, as she hit a dive off the top rope onto both women. However, she landed awkwardly on her knee, and that would be her undoing here. Deville got Riot a few minutes later in an ankle lock. She ripped and tore the leg of Ruby Riot. Finally, Ember Moon dove off the top rope with the Eclipse on Sonya Deville, and then, seeing Riot still writhing in pain, covered her instead, pinned her, picked up the win, and Ember Moon is going to get another shot at the NXT Women's title. Earlier this week, security cameras caught Undisputed Era giving Roderick Strong a t-shirt outside the Performance Center. Strong gave it back to them and walked away. Christy St. Cloud asked Mr. William Regal how we were going to determine the fourth competitor in the Fatal 4-Way match at TakeOver. He tried to say it when the iconic duo came screeching into the scene. Billie Kay said that she should be in the match, in the qualifying match. Mr. Regal agreed, but then he announced it would be a battle royal with every woman who has yet to get an opportunity to qualify yet. Billie pouted and stormed away as Peyton sarcastically thanked Mr. Regal. About a month ago, Raul Mendoza cut an awesome heel promo, and since he is yet to be allowed to talk, his punishment, by the way, for that one great promo has been a match with Cassius Ohno and now a match with Alistair Black, as he took on Black here in our next match. Velveteen Dream ran down before the bell and put on Black's vest. Black gave him the stare of death, which gave Mendoza the opening to go crazy as the bell rung. Mendoza, in the first 1 minute of this match, Mendoza hit every move in his arsenal, trying to catch Black off guard and try to pick up the surprising win. Unfortunately, the match went longer than 1 minute. Black caught a kick and then proceeded to rename his punching bag Raul Mendoza, as Black then took Mendoza's head off with Black Mass for the win. Raul Mendoza was 26. Black refused to acknowledge Velveteen Dream as Dream sauntered up the ramp in his wearing Alistair Black's vest. Finally, after Dream had left the ramp, had left the ringside area, Black momentarily looked up towards the ramp and gave it a stare. And Velveteen Dream's head is going to be next on the list. Christy St. Cloud sat down with NXT champion Drew McIntyre about what's been going on since he became champion a couple months ago. Drew said years ago he set the goal of being NXT champion and set a series of small goals to eventually reach that point. Now, I know we're going to point out the BS of him deciding 5 years ago, for instance, that he wanted to be NXT champion while he was on the main roster and still, doing half decent for himself. But actually, if you go into the Wayback Machine and look at the brackets for that original NXT title tournament that Seth Rollins won, one of the 8 competitors was, in fact, Drew McIntyre, which, don't want to tell Mauro and Nigel what to do, but perhaps one of them should actually bring that up because it would help further the story and further the dialogue that Drew has always wanted this NXT title instead of just some BS that, I bet most people don't even believe. So anyway, McIntyre talked about the disappointment of being released in 2014. He said he couldn't comprehend it. His parents and his girlfriend at the time, who's now his wife, were worried because he's never had a real job other than WWE. He told his then-girlfriend that things would be okay. However, that day he was released, the fire in him went out. He worked himself to the bone and built himself into something successful. He was finally able to return to WWE, to NXT, and is now the champion. Zelina Vega walked in and said she was taking over for Christy. Zelina said Drew and Andrade Cien Almas have a lot in common. They both were knocked down and out and both received second chances. The difference being Almas didn't have to get fired to get his second chance. Zelina said there's no bigger threat to the NXT title than Andrade Cien Almas and asked Drew why he's been avoiding Almas. Drew asked if she's been watching the show and sees the crap Drew's been going through and told her if he wanted a title shot, that Drew will fight anyone, anywhere, anytime. He recommended talking to William Regal. Zelina blew that off. So Drew told her that if talking to Mr. Regal wasn't good enough for her, to tell Andrade to come ask Drew for a title shot himself. Cassius Ohno was in action next, going on with Cesar Benoni. In case Cesar Benoni is a name that rings the slightest sense of a bell in the way back of your head, about 6 months ago, Cesar Benoni was the one that defeated Andrade Cien Almas when Almas was doing his run where he would be out partying until 3 or 4 at night, and then at 8 o'clock the next evening would be too exhausted to have his wrestling match and then lose, which it's still ridiculous when you say it's 6 months later. Anyway, you might recall Benoni in that match where Almas was too exhausted from partying all the time. Benoni got in 0 offense before Almas slipped on a banana peel and got pinned. Benoni, by the way, in receiving this butt kicking for 5 minutes, he learned so much offense as he was throwing out moves, moves upon moves upon moves here on against Ohno. The crowd did not care for Benoni. I doubt many of them actually remembered that he was the one that beat Almas 6 months ago. And actually, I also believe this was the last hour taped in the last set of tapings that they did. And the crowd, though, would momentarily wake up for Ohno. And Ohno won with a rolling elbow to the back of Benoni's head. Now, over the years, you've seen, they've announced sometimes matches 2-3 weeks in advance, and they've been big matches. Samoa Joe versus Sami Zayn. Finn Balor versus Shinsuke Nakamura. Pretty much every TakeOver match. These are matches they announce weeks ahead of time, multiple weeks ahead of time. So you're psyched up and properly prepared for this battle of the behemoths, this great main event match that you can't wait to watch. And so now they've announced that there will be a match in 2 weeks' time. In 2 weeks, right here on NXT, Johnny Gargano will go 1-on-1 with Fabian Aichner, who I believe has yet to get a win on TV. Alrighty. Why do we need to know about that 2 weeks in advance? Honestly, why do we even really need to know about it 1 week in advance? Who knows? But we do. Main event time. 6-man tag team action as Undisputed Era, Adam Cole, Bobby Fish, and Kyle O'Reilly go 3-on-3 with the NXT Tag Team Champions of the World, Sanity. This feud has been boiling over since back at TakeOver Brooklyn when Sanity won the tag team titles, and they were attacked by Fish and O'Reilly. This has led to both backstage and in-ring attacks by both sides, and it culminates here tonight. Sanity got the early advantage on O'Reilly, and I'm not saying O'Reilly's skinny, but Killian Dane dwarfed him while Dane was holding him in the corner. Eventually, Undisputed Era got the heat on Sanity, specifically Eric Young, as they took turns knocking down and keeping down EY as the match progressed. Finally, O'Reilly lined Young up for some sort of a wacky kick, but instead decided to knock out an annoying Alexander Wolf who was on the ring apron. That, unfortunately, ended up being his undoing, as Young made his comeback, and he got the hot tag to the big man Killian Dane, as Dane ran wild on the former Red Dragon. Fish and O'Reilly got heaved here, there, and everywhere in between, while Cole stood on the floor and watched in shock and terror not seen since Birdemic. Cole tried to run away at one point, but he was stopped by Young and Wolf and thrown back in the ring. Sanity was about to finish off Cole, pick up the big 6-man victory, when the Authors of Pain made their triumphant return. Authors of Pain, not seen since losing the tag team titles back in Brooklyn, returned with Paul Ellering at their side, ran in for the disqualification as they attacked Sanity. Akam and Razor took out all 3 men by themselves. They laid out Dane with the last chapter and drove Young and Wolf into one another with the Super Collider, and the show ended with the AOP holding the tag team titles that they once held aloft over their heads. So that does it for NXT. The Authors of Pain are back. They want their titles back. What's going to happen next week, as we are 1 week closer to TakeOver and a much more important main event than Brock versus Jinder. But until next week, I want to thank you all for listening, and I'll talk to you again in 7 days.
You're listening to the Angry Marks Podcast Network.